Good morning. How's everybody doing? Man, it's good to see you guys. We are getting ready to go into a couple standalone weeks. We are going to talk about vision today, vision for our church, vision for your life. Next week, we're going to talk about spots. We're going to talk about why you need to get connected in a small group. We're making a ton of changes to spots. You're going to hear about those next week. And then we're going to start a really cool series. We're going to start a series called Restored, where we're going to look for a series of weeks at people's lives that since they've been at North Road, God has completely restored them, and what has happened in their marriages, in their life with their kids, what's happened in their life with their families. And every week we're going to look at how God restored them and how God can have the ability to restore you if you need that, all right? Today we're going to talk about, like I said, vision and what God wants is vision in your life. And so I got this idea, and I want to see what you think of it. I have decided that today when I preach, I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to throw it out there, and anything that comes to my mind as we talk about vision, I'm just going to throw it out there, and and we're not going to have a real plan. I'm just going to just kind of tell you what I think. Actually, I'm not going to do that, but can you imagine if I did that for just a second? Can you imagine if you go, man, I got dressed up, I fought with my kids in the car, I went without my cup of coffee till I got right outside that exit door, I was shaking when I got here just to get that cup of coffee, and now you're going to wing it? You're just going to throw out whatever comes to your mind? That would frustrate you, wouldn't it? Right? It would be frustrating to think that the pastor didn't even study, the pastor didn't pray through this, the pastor didn't think about it, he just got up and he winged it. But here's the reality and the cold truth sometimes in our lives. We would never want our person that we're going to come in and watch to wing something, but sometimes we wing our life every single day, don't we? We kind of walk through it without vision. We get up in the morning and we just kind of let life happen, and we get to the end of the day and we went, oh, man, I'm just glad I made it. And when it comes to vision, we haven't really sat down and set goals and thoughts and visions for what our kids will look like. We haven't sat down and set goals and thoughts and vision for what our marriage would look like. What we want to look like as a family financially in 10 years. What we want to look like as a family as far as it concerns memories in 10 years. What it's going to look like for my kids to go to college. Or what I want to aspire to be. We just kind of walk and we trudge through this life, sometimes very visionless. I want to tell you some very clear truth. I don't care where you've been, what you've done, what story you have, what background you have, how bad your life has gone and how good your life has gone. Here's a truth that is underlying for all of us. You ready? Christ created a vision unique to every single one of us. Unique. And our only job in this world is not to go out and make something of ourselves. It's not to go out and be more successful. It's not to go out and make the most money we can possibly make. Our one and only goal in life should be to find that vision that God created for us. And sometimes in life, we just kind of forget that, don't we? Things happen, life occurs, and we're going to look at why that happens. And we miss the mark. There was a story in 2004. The Olympic Games happened, and there was a guy by the name of Matthew Emmons. Anybody know this story? This is a horrible story about vision. But Matthew Emmons was in the 2004 Olympics. He was in the 50-meter rifle competition, which means they had to shoot for an hour and 15 minutes at each location. They had an hour and 15 minutes at each location to shoot 40 shots, standing up, sitting down, and laying down, okay? They were from 50 meters away. When that was done, if they were one of the first to finish, or one of the top 10 to finish, then they would have a series of 10 more shots, and during those 10 more shots, they had to get them done the fastest and the most accurately. And here comes Matthew Emmons, man. He flies through the first 3 series. He gets to the 4th series where he's got just 10 shots left. He's so far ahead of everybody. If he just hits his shots, he's going to win the Olympic gold medal. He's in first place by a long shot. He takes the first 9, and they're perfect. He lays down for the last and final shot. He finds the target in his sight. He pressures the trigger to the point where the bullet fires off, and boom, right through the middle of the target. Just one problem. Matthew Emmons had sighted in his partner's target next to him. He didn't sight in his own. He hit it right in the middle. And he went from going to a gold medal to 8th place. He didn't even medal at all. Why? Because he missed the middle of the target? No, he hit the middle of the target. He just hit the wrong target. And some of us in our lives, we're hitting the middle of the target, aren't we? We're hitting the target and the goals that just kind of happen in life, but we're not hitting possibly God's target for our life. And here's the reality and the problem with that. Some of us are going to get to the very end of our days, and people are going to go, man, he was a good guy, but he didn't really accomplish much. I go to funerals because of my job, obviously, and you'll see the people who hit the target, and you'll see the people who miss the target. You know how I see that? Here's how I see that. When a person hits the target, their family goes, oh man, dude, you know what they did? They did this, and they did this, and they did this, and they did this, and they had this story to tell about them, and this how they affected a person's life, and this about how they were sitting right in the middle of their sweet spot, their vision that God had given them. And then you'll go to another person's funeral that completely missed the target. You know what those people do? Here's what they do. They just got to put their head down. There's nothing worse, nothing in life worse than doing a funeral for a person who had a vision from God for his life or her life, and they missed it. So before we get going, I just want to ask you a question. If you were going to be at the end of your life and people were going to talk about you, would they go, man, he's got the Matthew Emmons story. He hit a target. It just wasn't the right target. Or would they say, man, let me tell you story after story after story after story about why they hit the right target? Are you sitting there right now wondering if you hit the right target? Here's a great way to know. You ready? Think about some people in life. Tim Tebow, a guy who hit the target God has called him to hit. Billy Graham, dude that hit the target God had called him to hit. Mother Teresa, a lady that hit the target God had called her to hit. And what do they all have in common? You go to every single one of them, and here's what they would say. Man, I have incredible peace in my life. I don't have frustration in my life. I don't feel this emptiness in my life like I haven't gotten there yet. I just feel good. I feel like I'm right in the middle of where I'm at. Let me ask you a question. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like you're right in the middle of where God created you to be? And if not, that's okay, because we're sitting in the right seat. Here's the deal. Until you take your last breath, you can fulfill the vision God's given for you. I don't care if you started out life as a cocaine addict. I don't care if you started out with broken marriages. I don't care if you started out and you didn't have the greatest family life. It doesn't matter. What matters is how you finish the race, not how you started. I've met hundreds of pastors who start life right when it comes to ministry, and they finish all wrong. And you know what people remember? They don't remember the beginning. What do they remember? They remember the end. You want an example? What do you think Jared, the Subway guy, is going to be remembered for? You think he's going to be remembered because he walked a lot and lost a lot of weight eating Subway? Or you think people are going to remember that he molested children or looked at child porn? We're going to remember the last one. It's the last thing that you do. Now, here's the cool thing about life, right? Jared could give his life to Jesus and could become a godly man, and people would again remember the last thing that he did. You are not a lost, forgotten cause if you're feeling like your vision is somewhere askew. Okay? So if you got your Bibles, you want to know how to get this vision accomplished, do me a favor, turn to Matthew chapter 6, and we're going to be in verse 19. Okay? Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Here we go. Let me read it for you. It says this. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and rust can destroy and where thieves can break in and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I love that statement. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That day, as Matthew Emmons sat down, laid down and pulled the sights in on that target, that's where his heart was, right? And that's where his treasure ended up. If we're aiming at the wrong target, we're going to be hitting the wrong target, and we're going to get treasures that we never intended for. Look what it says. Let me read it to you. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up your treasures in heaven where neither moth or rust destroys and where the thieves do not break in and steal. Let me ask you a question. When it comes to your finances, when it comes to your marriage, when it comes to your children, when it comes to your future job, who do you talk to get advice? Do you go by what the world says, or do you go by what God says? When you sit down to make a big financial decision, do you go, God, Do you want me to do this right now? Is this something in my life that I can afford and I should do? Are you going to be honored by the choice that I make? Is this going to play into the vision that you have for my life? When it comes to choices and things that you're going to do as a married couple, or even aside from your married life, do you sit down first and just go, hey, God, the vision that you chose for me, does this fit into my marriage? There's a guy, you may have heard of him. His name's George Washington Carver. You ever heard of him? What's he famous for? Anybody know? Come on, yeah, peanuts, peanut butter, right? Exactly. George Washington Carver, if you go back and you look at when he was created, there is no beginning date. Nobody knows because he was a slave. He was a black man born in around the 1860s, okay? And George Washington Carver became a scientist. He rose above slavery and became a scientist. And here's the deal about George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver knew Christ had created him for a purpose. And instead of finding his purpose from the world and what the world had to say, George Washington Carver decided, you know what? I'm going to surrender my will to God. There was a gentleman that had called him about midway through life and said, hey, I think you ought to move to Alabama. We need to teach these people how to grow crops. They need some help. George Washington Carver, at that time, was a professor at Iowa State University and was starting to make some money and make a name for himself because he was a really smart guy. And he sat down and he said, God, for what you created me for, should I go to Alabama? And God said, go to Alabama. George Washington Carver left his safe place in Iowa State and moved to a little institute down in Alabama and began to take a group of about 25 kids and 20 acres and began to farm it. People thought he was crazy. How are you going to make red clay turn into anything? They brought dog feces in. They brought in slime from the swamps. They brought in different kinds of dirt. And over time, they began to till this up and mix this dirt together. Came time for the first time that they planted. And they decided that they were going to plant something like a soybean. And all the people are like, you mean we did all this and we're not going to plant cotton? He goes, man, the soil's not ready. And people criticized him. He said, we're going to plant something, I think it's called a chickpea or something. I'm not a farmer, so I'm not going to try to even guess what it was. But anyway, it was a grain for feeding. They grow it. And he takes them in and he begins to cook some meals with the product that they had made out of the garden. They went, this is pretty good. And he said, well, if you'll trust me, let's try this. And they went out for the very first time and they planted sweet potatoes. He started to show them how they could use sweet potatoes. And finally, they got the soil ready to where they can make cotton. It was at that institute where George Washington Carver created peanut butter, nitroglycerin. He created different variations of paste, toothpaste, of lotions and different things that all came from the peanut. They came from the sweet potato. That helps us in our culture to function today. Why? Here's why. You ready? Because George Washington Carver didn't think that his story was the best story. He thought God's story was the best story. And he said, God, I'm going to surrender my will to you and I'm going to let you control my path. Let me ask you a question. Who controls your path? Is it God or is it you? I know I've said this before, but God writes a better story than you do, right? But God cannot begin to write that story until you've surrendered the pen over to Him and you said, God, I won't try to write this anymore. I'm going to let you write this. But what do we do sometimes? We don't even, it's not about handing God the pen. We've already handed culture the pen, haven't we? Well, here's what needs to happen. If you want to see God blow up in the middle of your marriage, if you want to see God blow up in the middle of your family, if you want godly children, a godly marriage, a godly home, a godly life that has peace and not a lack of peace, then here's what has to happen. There has to come a moment when you surrender the will of your life, like George Washington Carver, over to God. What does that look like? Here's what that looks like. It looks like sitting down and going, God, what do you want from me? I'll do it. You know, the hardest thing for us, I've shared this a little bit. We have a little boy in our home who is he's a foster child. And we are in the middle of, we've had him for 5 months now. He's kind of become ours. It's kind of weird. And he's not ours. He belongs to somebody else. And there's a chance one day that he may go home. And there's times when it just makes us want to throw up a little bit, you know, to think that he's going to have to go back when he's become so close to our family. Now I could go, hey God, you know what? It's not your will, it's my will. And so because it's my will, I'm not going to put my heart out there and be hurt like that. And so I'm just not going to do that. Or I can say, hey God, I surrendered to you a long time ago. And God, if you want me to hurt because of that in order to give him life, then I'll do it because I believe you can tell a greater story. You know what I can't wait for? I can't wait for the fact that my wife and I, we chose to surrender ourselves to whatever God wanted. I cannot wait to see the end of God's story because I know that it's going to be greater than the one I could write on my own. But sometimes in life, we are so scared, we are so fearful to give the reins over to God that we would rather choose things that, as the Bible says, that rust and destroy and people can break in and steal. We would rather put our hope in natural things than supernatural things. It's easier to have a nice truck than to go do something great for God. It's easier to go out and get a great job than it is to do something great in your family. So I'll focus on that instead of focusing on this. Is that where you're at right now? If so, man, let's get a new perspective. Look what it says. Let's go on. Verse 22. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body is going to be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? I want you to do me a favor real quick. I want to do a little test with you if I can, okay? Just real quick, I want to do a little test. Come on. Here we go. Here's my test. You ready? Close your eyes for a second. Your eyes are the theater inside your heart, okay? Everybody's eyes closed? I want to throw you a challenge. I want you to picture a giraffe with your eyes closed right now. Out in the African safari. You got it pictured? Can you see his long neck? And can you see the colors? Can you see the reeds that are kind of blowing around him as he's kind of walking through the African safari? Do you see other animals? Maybe an elephant walks by or a tiger, or maybe he's with another giraffe and they're just kind of playing in the middle of the African safari. Do you see it? Isn't it amazing that your eyes can create the vivid color of a giraffe? That your eyes can see that? Now, look up at me. You ready for this? That's vision. I didn't put a picture before you, did I? Did I show you any picture of a giraffe? No, Your mind's eye came up with its own vision of what that giraffe should look like. And you know what's amazing is there's a whole room of people who had a different vision of what that giraffe looked like. Now, let's read this real quick, okay? The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body is going to be full of light, all right? Now think about this for a second. I'm going to see if I can get this back up. Hang on one second. I'm sorry. I have messed something up here. Don't do that. Where are you? Love technology. Anybody hate technology besides me? Come on, baby. Why are you not going to work? Don't do that to me. This doesn't work. Well, I'm going to go without my notes. I am going to wing it. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. So we said the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, then your whole body is going to be full of light. I want to ask you a question. Here's how we know if our eye is full of light or if it's full of something else. It's all about the little things that go into it. What are your eyes looking at the most? Where are your actions finding you going the most? Right? If our eyes are on things opposite of what God's vision is for our life, then guess what? Our eyes are going to create a vision of something else. I can close my eyes right now. When we started this church 2 years ago, we said we're going to be about three things: worshiping together, worshiping God through His Word, worshiping God through the words that He speaks through us. We're going to connect together, and we're going to serve. And that has turned into this. And now we've bought 125 acres down the street here. And as I close my eyes, I don't see a giraffe. You want to know what I see? I see a church one day that is going to reach hundreds, if not thousands of people. I close my eyes and I see a sports complex that's reaching little kids doing football ministry. I close my eyes, and you know what I see? I see this crisis pregnancy center that is meeting women right at the point in which they're ready to give up their kids, and we're either finding an adoptive home for them, or we're finding somebody who can minister to them and help them get their life right. Man, I see homes that are built specifically for people who are willing to foster kids and surrender their life to that. I see a school that meets the needs of kids. I see fields where kids are out playing. I see a Celebrate Recovery that's so big that has shrunk, let me back up. I see a Celebrate Recovery that has gotten so big and has gotten so active that the area is starting to change when it comes to drugs and alcohol and other addictions. Those are the things that I see. Man, I can close my eyes and I can envision it. But here's what has to happen. You ready? Check this out. My eye is the lamp of my body. It's the little things that I let happen into my eyes, the little things that I take pictures of, the little things or the big things that I see, but it's the little things that I do. For example, I may see myself as this really skinny, very strong dude, right? But here's the reality. If little by little I'm putting things into my body that is causing me to look the opposite of, then I'm never going to get to the vision that I wanted to get to. Some of us, we sit around and we go, man, I really want to be a godly person, but it's the little things that you're putting inside of your life that is causing the lamp of your body to go from light to a little bit of darkness. And you know what happens when that darkness comes in? Here's what happens. In the middle of the night, sometimes I'll get up. Anybody, when they got over the age of 40, have to go to the bathroom more in the middle of the night? Anybody else? Okay, good, I'm not the only one. Oh man, I'm telling you, I've gone from like never getting up, sleeping like a rock to a couple times a night, man. I'm like, dang it, I gotta go again, right? And then you make the trek from the bathroom, and you know, we got one of those headboard, footboard things, and I'll go around the corner because I'm trying to not wake everybody up, and inevitably, what do? Because you cannot see, it's like, wham, you just nail your foot on the board, right? And then you're like, oh, you know, you don't want to be loud because you're in complete darkness and you don't want to wake everybody up, so you kind of make your way to the bathroom. That's exactly what happens with vision for us sometimes. When our eyes get dirty, when they get darkened, guess what ends up happening? We stop doing the little things that turn the lights on. And we start trying to make our way through life with a soiled lens, a covering over the eyes of our life, and we cannot get to where God's called us to be. Some of you guys, God has this incredible vision, and it's just waiting there for you to take it, and you have so covered yourself up with little pieces of darkness, you can't see it anymore. You know what's going to put a church out there? It's going to be little bitty actions that we do as a church that one day culminates into a vision. You understand that? Let me give you an example. 2 years ago, we never thought we were going to do that. We never had any idea that was going to be available. You know what we wanted to do? We wanted to reach people. We wanted to reach families. We wrote this vision about how we were going to reach the nuclear family. We wanted people to connect, so we created these spots groups. These spots groups where people can come and do life. I did a wedding on Wednesday night at 8:30 over at Black & Associates for a person that's in a spot group. There was like 100 people, well maybe not 100, but there was like 50 or 60 people there because their spot group loves them. They were connecting, right? We're doing ministry of service in town through getting ready to do sports ministry and football. And it's going to be those little things that we do over and over and over again, along with some execution. You know, in January, you're going to see a picture. We've been working with an architect. In January, you're going to see a full picture of what this looks like, right? Over the 9 months after that, we're going to begin to ask you guys to step up with us, to see this vision and to build that thing so that we can start to reach people in a way never before possible. Next September, we're going to watch as ground is going to move. And it's going to be those little things that bring this vision to fruition. Let me ask you a question. In your life, how are the little things, not the big things, but the little things? My little boy came home from homecoming. I say he's my little boy. My 15-year-old came home from homecoming last night. And we turned his homecoming dance into a spiritual conversation. It's the little things. Playing video games with my other son. We turned video games into a spiritual conversation. It's the little things. It's praying at the dinner table. It's sitting down with them and talking to them about who God wants them to be. It's talking to my wife about where we want to be in a marriage. It's the little things that we constantly put in every single day that creates the bigger overall vision. How are you with the little things? Let's read this last part. No one can serve two masters. Nobody can have two visions. Now, here's the amazing thing to me, and I'm gonna kind of finish right here today. Here's the amazing thing to me. We come in this church and we go, okay, I'm going to North Road today. I'm all about worshiping, connecting, and serving, right? Because that's our vision. That's who we are as a church. And when I walk in that door, that's who I am. You know what? There's a problem with that. Here's the problem with that. That vision doesn't start at that exit door or that enter door. That vision should carry out through every single part of our life, right? Just as serious as I am about worshiping here and connecting with others here and serving here, I should be going home and with my family. We need to be worshiping together. We need to be praying together. We need to be connecting with each other. And we need to talk about what it looks like to connect with people who are like you. We need to talk about what it looks like to have very limited connection with people who will draw you away. I mean, I need to teach my boys what it looks like to serve. As a couple, we need to be serving people. And when I put this vision that's at church in my home vision, guess what ends up happening? I watch my life change because it's those little things that turn my family into who Christ wants it to be. We think sometimes, okay, I've got to have a big vision. I've got to do this big thing. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to blah, right? You know what it takes to have God's vision? It doesn't take you coming up with it at all. It takes you surrendering to His will. It takes you making sure that you are setting goals. Man, we are setting goals in this church. Next week, we're going to launch Spots with a whole new vision for it. We're going to train the people who are leading. We're going to develop leaders. We're going to get a master plan for our church. We got a vision for it to look differently every single Sunday. We're putting screens on the outside of the building so you can watch the announcements out there. We're going to put a screen up by the children's area so you can watch announcements there. Why? Because we feel like we got to have a plan and a goal to get to the greatest point of excellence we can so that you guys know the gospel the way you should. And here's the deal. We should take that vision home. How do we become as excellent as we can at home and set goals for our family so we can be who God's created us to be? But I get back to, nobody can serve two masters. I can't come in here on Sunday and go, okay, it's time to worship, connect, and serve, and go home and serve another master. Because here's what's going to happen. I put a little bit of God, and I put a whole lot of the world. I insert a little bit of God, and I put a whole lot of the world. And it's kind of like I'm aiming up for that spot, that target, if you will. And every single time I put a whole lot of the world, it's like somebody takes my hand and boom, just hits the gun, and I move over one target. Do not get to the end of your life having shot the wrong target. How do you do that? Very simple. You ready? Number one, surrender your life to God. Man, if there's never been a point in time when you said, Jesus, you can have lordship of my life, guess what? You're going to get to the end of your life and you're going to have failed because you cannot do this without Jesus. If Jesus has never become the Savior of your life, you are already aiming at the wrong target. You need to change that. Some of you guys, you've given your life to Jesus. You're just not following Him. And you need to surrender your will to Him. Secondly, you need to set goals in your life. What do you want your family to look like? Do you have this vision? Remember that your eyes are a movie theater? Man, here's what my vision is. That my boys would be godly men. That my boys would grow up to marry godly women. That my boys would raise their family the way they should. Do you notice none of that has to do with a sport? None of that has to do with their education. None of that has to do with their success in this world. I care about one thing, and that is that they are godly, because here's the truth. If I care about those things, if I surrender my will to those things, God will make them whatever He wants them to become. And they'll be great at it because I've taught them to be like Him, not to be like this world. Are you setting goals for your family, for your marriage, for you? Finally, last one. Have you surrendered yourself? Are you setting goals? Are you ready finally to fight when everybody else tells you you're crazy? Because that's going to happen. People are going to say, why do you raise your kids like that? Why do you have your marriage like that? Why do you make these decisions to leave us from doing this and go to church when you could just hang with us? Why do you do this stuff? It doesn't make any sense. And here's why. Because you have a vision, and at the end of your life, you want to hit the target. You want to hit the target. So no matter what anybody says, you need to determine in your heart, I'm going to get whatever God wants out of my life, out of my life. I want to show you this real fast. This week, we gave you these bumper stickers, these North Road Community Church bumper stickers. We gave them to you for two reasons. One is that it's a shameless plug for our church. Just being honest. You can put it on your car. I was told, because some people might try, don't put it on the outside of your window, put it on the inside of your window. It's a static sticker. If you put it on the outside, it'll blow off. Okay, so put it on the inside. Yeah, there you go. It'll be backwards. Thank you, Kevin. So flip it. All right, here's the deal. You ready? But here's what I really wanted out of this. You ready? Is that every time that you get in your car and you see this bumper sticker, it's that you are called to worship God and connect with your family and teach them to serve as much outside that exit door as you are when you walk in here. You know what will happen if we do that? Here's what will happen. You ready? If my life and my vision for what's important changes, when it comes time to build that building, it'll be no problem, because our money won't be ours, it'll be God's. And we'll have surrendered ourselves to God's will. And it'll be nothing to do that, because we won't be going, oh, but I want this and I want this and I want to do this. We're doing God's will, right? If we surrender to what God wants, when it comes time to connect, we're going to watch God connect people on a level here we never thought was possible, because we're surrendered to God's will and He writes a better story. Man, when it comes time to serve, people are going to stand up and go, what is going on at that North Road Church? They service like nothing I've ever seen. And it's only going to be because our vision's on God, not on the world. But we have to do it together. Will you do me a favor? Just bow your head and close your eyes for 1 second. The band's going to come up and they're going to play. Here's my question for you. If you're sitting in here and you go, you know what? If you're asking me right now, Matt, have I accomplished God's will in my life right now? Am I living out God's vision? If you would say no right now, no, man, I'm not. Would you just be honest and transparent with me for a second and lift your hand? Man, I don't feel like I'm living out God's vision, and it bothers me. Just lift it high. Okay. All right, you can put them down. Let me ask you this question. If you're sitting in here and you feel like the reason you've never lived out God's vision is because you've never surrendered to God's will for your life, will you raise your hand? Just that's me. I've never surrendered myself to God. Before I deal with the rest of you, those of you that lifted your hand just then, okay, will you look up at me for a second? Has there ever been a time in your life when you said, hey, Jesus, you can have lordship of my life? Has there ever been that moment? You can just shake your head yes or no. No? No? Here's what I'd like, okay? I'd like an opportunity just to talk with you about what that looks like, okay? So I'm going to look you guys up, and we're just going to have a conversation. I'll find you somewhere. We'll have you come in. We'll sit down, and we'll talk about that, okay? Because I want to help you. You cannot find God's vision for your life until you find God, okay? So I'm going to help you do that. For the rest of you that raised your hand, I just want to pray for you. Man, it is not too late. Surrendering yourself to God's will. Setting goals of what you want to see because you've already seen it in your mind. And sticking to it no matter how crazy people call you. Let me pray for you. God, I just ask that you would just be with these people, that you would open their eyes, that, God, they would stop serving two masters, that they would try to just get the filth out of their life that has just kind of distracted them And God, filth, when we say filth in our culture, sometimes we think of the dirtiest things. Sometimes it's the most innocent things, the little things that we put in place of you. God, I pray that you would just walk with us, that you would guide us. God, I pray that as these people that raise their hand go home, that they would bow their head at their table and they'd just say, God, you got me. That God, they begin to pray and set goals for what you want for their life. And then God, they would go act on them. God, your vision is huge for their life. I pray that they understand that. And God, I just ask that you would give our church a vision that's so big that God, it would blow us all away at how awesome you are. And I ask these things in your name.